I got to get people to love me. I need love so desperately. Seduction is a high form of power because you make people feel pleasure. You make them feel excited or interested in you. And then their resistance to your ideas slowly lowers, and you have the ability to influence them and to move them in the direction that you want. If you yell at them, like how we were talking about your child, and you tell them, do this, do that, they resent it, and for good reason. But if you're subtler, if you're more seductive in your approach, if you're more indirect, people will do what you want or go in your direction without ever even realizing it. So it was a sub-theme in the 48 Laws of Power. And so I was sort of interested in the psychology of that and why some people are good at it and some people are awkward about it. So when I finished the 48 Laws of Power, I thought this would be a natural segue, the next book.
What are the qualities of a great seducer?
Well, I like to distinguish between cold seducers and warm seducers. A cold seducer is something you don't want to be. That's the typical image that we might have of a male seducer, but even of a female seducer, like the great courtesans, etc., where they're just after money or the men are just after sex. That's not my ideal. My ideal is kind of a back and forth quality where it's not domination. It's sort of like a game that you're playing. It's like a mating game. It's like a courtship ritual where both people are kind of seducing each other. And so what makes for a great seducer is very simple. I can summarize it very simply. You are outer directed. So when you meet somebody for the first time or you're on a date or whatever it is, you're not having that internal monologue going, does she like me or does he like me? Am I dressed well? Am I saying stupid things? What can I do to impress them? No. You turn it off and you're outer directed and you're listening to them and you're entering their spirit and you're hearing them say things that give you idea of what they're missing in life, of what they want, of what their needs are, of what makes them an individual. You're absorbing it, you're entering into their spirit, and then you can reflect it back to them. You can give them gifts. You can take them to places that show that you're attentive to them. Because if you look at how we are in our day-to-day life, normally people never pay us attention. They're always so self-absorbed. They're never thinking about us. The times where you get the sense that people are actually interested in who you are as an individual is pretty rare. If you give that feeling to someone, it's incredibly powerful because we all want to be validated. We all want to be recognized. So the seducer is not someone who's all worried about him or herself and thinking. They're involved in the other person. They're absorbed like a sponge inside their psychology, inside their world.
A lot of this is, very applicable to romance and dating, et cetera, et cetera. It feels, for whatever reason, not necessarily something I've read much about in your work, but it feels like dating and romance and relationships have become much more complicated in the modern world. That it's become much more difficult to seduce somebody. What are the attributes of someone then that is not good at seducing?
Anti-seducer has many qualities. I have a whole chapter on the anti-seducer. I try and define it. There's several of them. I don't have them all memorized, but one quality that's very anti-seductive is preaching and moralizing. Is like telling people, oh, that's wrong what you just said, or your politics are ugly, or you're not really good at this, or something or other. Having a moral superiority, a sense of sanctimony in a realm which should be about pleasure, where should be that kind of equality, that kind of back and forth dynamic, where you're asserting your moral superiority, is deeply, deeply anti-seductive, the element of preaching to people. Not being generous, and I mean not just with money is important, but not being generous with your spirit, right? You want to be open, you want to give as much as you can to the other person of yourself, of your time, of your money, of your energy, etc. So being all kind of crimped and I don't want to give, I don't want to spend money, I want to take you to the cheap place to eat, I don't want to give you much time, is very, very anti-seductive.
When you were talking a second ago about the person who goes on the date and they're thinking about themselves and what they, what their hair looks like or whatever else, that spoke to an insecure person. Is insecurity a seductive quality, or is it a anti-seductive quality?
It is anti-seductive. Now, there is a part of weakness that is seductive. So I would say vulnerability is seductive, but insecurity is anti-seductive. And there's a big difference.
Why does vulnerability draw people to you?
Because the sense, so if I can define seduction in simple terms, most of the time we are closed to the influence of other people. Particularly now, we have these walls up because life is harsh. People are coming at us with their advertisements, with their pleas, with their wanting money, with this, that, and the other. And we've all learned to be very defensive, right? And seduction is an openness, is the opposite of that. And you felt it when you were a child towards your parents. You felt very vulnerable and open. And there was an element of your parents and how they treated you that was very much like a seduction, right? So seduction is about being open to the other person to the extent where you can even fall in love. You can fall under their spell. And the sense of letting go of your ego, letting go of your defensiveness, and letting another person enter your world is being seduced. It requires vulnerability. If you meet the typical scenario is of a man who's not vulnerable at all. He's so powerful and in control and everything, has no vulnerabilities. It's frightening, for a woman. It could be very frightening. Like this, he's so strong, he's so invulnerable that there's something wrong about it. Maybe he's a serial killer. Maybe he's got skeletons in his closet. Something isn't right about that. What seduces you about a puppy, about a child, about an animal, is their vulnerability. It makes you want to hug them. It makes you want to help them, right? The sense which if you came upon a tiger that's there and they don't need that, well, that's not seductive. I mean, on your screen it is, but if they're there in your living room, that's not seductive. But that puppy is, right? Vulnerability, the sense that somebody needs protection or help, brings out qualities in us that we don't normally have that I think allow for seduction. So that is being vulnerable. That is, I can be influenced by that other person. I am open to their spirit, right? That's being vulnerable. The word vulnerable, I hate to sound like a professor here, so excuse me, in seduction, comes from the root of it means a wound, vulnus. So you have a wound inside of you and you need healing. And the other person naturally wants to help you, right? But being insecure is means I'm so self-absorbed, I'm so worried about myself that I can't get out of it. And we've all had that experience. When you meet somebody and you can sense, you can smell their insecurity in them. I'm not judging them because we all have insecurities. It makes you feel insecure. It makes you feel a little bit awkward. Whereas if you meet someone who's not like that, who's confident, etc., it brings out that quality in you. So if you're on a date and there's someone you smell that kind of insecurity, it makes you awkward and insecure. It creates a kind of a problem. So that would be the difference between the two.
There's going to be a lot of people listening to this that are single and ready to mingle. What advice would you give them in terms of being great at dating? You've talked about the importance of vulnerability there and how that kind of forms connection between humans in a very innate way. What else is great dating advice for the single people out there?
Well, the thing is, okay, there's several things. So first of all, we live in a culture where people think you shouldn't have to put effort into something like love and romance. You should just be who you are, man. I don't have to put on a role. I don't have to play a game. That's manipulative, blah, 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 blah. No, I'm sorry. Love and romance is something that is almost biological. If you look at animals and mating rituals, they're incredibly elaborate. Seduction is a mating ritual. And so the worst thing you can feel is that this person isn't putting any effort into something. Let's just say it's from the woman's point of view. This man, He just shows up wearing jeans and his usual sloppy outfit. He doesn't comb his hair, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. He takes me to the pub for dinner on our first date. You know, he's not thinking about me. He's not willing to put any effort into it. If he's not willing to put any effort into it, what's it going to be like 3 months down the line when he completely takes me for granted, which is what happens in a relationship? Am I not important enough, right? Whereas the ability to have a little bit of effort, to think of it as kind of theater and drama, and that there's nothing evil about it. So I'm going to dress nicely. I just have to be fancy. It's just that I'm going to put some effort into how I look. I'm going to take her to a place that I'm not talking about candle lights and roses and that kind of crap. It doesn't have, you can be creative. It can be somewhere that's scuzzy, that's on the wrong side of town, but it's different and it's appealing to, and you put some thought into it. There's a reason you're taking her there, right?
I have a friend who went on a date, and she came back from the date and was complaining because the person that she went on that first date with was took her to a spot where he had an available valid discount code for like 2 to 1. And
talk about anti-seduction. There you go.
Why is that anti-seductive? In that case, one might say that male is being, economically savvy, financially savvy.
If you're not able to let go of your kind of tightness when it comes to a woman, then something's wrong with you, man. Just let go. Spend some extra money. Spend the extra 10 quid that you might need to spend on taking her to someplace different. But it signals a kind of cheapness. And it's not about money. It's about a cheapness in your spirit, right? She's not worth, letting go. Okay, maybe you don't have that much, but my God, you have enough. It's not going to make, if you're that poor, then okay, maybe. But probably not. You can afford it. Show that it means something to you. Seduction is a language. It's not a language of words. It's a language of gestures that we're paying attention to. We're paying attention to people's body language. We're paying attention to their actions, to the things that they never say. So when you signal that discounts are so important to you that even on the first date you have to have a discount, you're signaling that there's something tight about you in your nature, and it's not very pleasant.
From doing this podcast and speaking about topics like love and sex and dating and dating apps even, one of the comments I saw quite frequently was from young men who are struggling to seduce a woman, or vice versa. Specifically young men that, and then I read some stats. I think Scott Galloway came on the podcast and talked about how, I'm going to butcher these numbers, but a staggering amount of men haven't had sex young men haven't had sex in the last 12 months. And then when I looked at the comments section, specifically on YouTube, I kind of saw that energy reflected, where it looked like young men in particular were struggling to seduce a mate, a partner in the modern world. Is that real in your view? Is there something that has changed in society? Has that always been the case? Is there anything we can do if we're a young man that's struggling in the modern world because of the internet and computers and this and dating apps? And
well, a lot of it is, I'm afraid to say, is internet porn, where you get the idea that sex is something that should be very easy and quick, and that women should have that kind of body and physique, et cetera, and that becomes your norm, et cetera. That can be very damaging. But the idea that things must come easy and quick is very prevalent. And to win over someone like, let's say you're a man and it's a woman who might be reluctant to have sex for good reason or reluctant to have a relationship, requires some effort. It requires some thinking. You can't just hack your way. You can't just swipe and get it. You can have your internet sex, but you're not going to get that in real life. It doesn't work that way. It takes time. It takes patience, and you're going to have to work and you're going to be rejected. Being with people is a skill. Being a social animal Although there's a part that comes naturally, if you spend all of your time here, you're losing that skill of how to respond to people's body language. You know, half of the thing is you're sitting in a bar opposite, let's say it's a woman, and how she crosses her legs, how she sips her drink, how she looks at you, how she touches her hair. She's signaling things. It's a language. It's a beautiful language, right? You have to learn it, and you're not going to learn it here because you can't. You have to be in person. It has to be skin to skin. You have to get a feel for what other people are thinking and feeling. And we're actually really, really good at that. Humans have, that's what makes us human. It's called mirror neurons. I can sense what's going on in your mind. I can read your body language. You have to get out in the world, and you have to put yourself physically out there and try and have rejection. And I know it sounds awful, but it is a skill in a way where you're learning how to like understand and deal with people and understand who they are and get inside their spirit. It takes time and effort and patience. So for young men, you have to realize that, right? If you think everything has to be easy and quick, it's never going to work for you. And I talk about the Hollywood actor Errol Flynn, who is perhaps numerically the greatest male seducer ever, because it's estimated that he had seduced close to 3,000 women, and he died when he was 50. And if I did the math one day, I go, how can that possibly be? And I tried to research what was his secret, and it was hard to find out. Finally, I found a book written by a woman whom he had seduced, another actress, and she said he was so relaxed and so comfortable. It was like an animal type thing. And then when I would sit with him, it was almost as if I had drunk 2 martinis just sitting next to him. His comfort and his security and his confidence, his relaxed attitude, it just made me drunk. So feeling relaxed, feeling confident and not defensive and comfortable with yourself is a very powerful seductive quality. I mean, there are many of them, but that's one that I would point out.
Have you ever figured out what builds confidence? You earlier on, you were talking about how children need to experience things firsthand. You can't just tell them. You can't just tell someone, for example, to be confident. Preaching doesn't seem to work. What is it in your view that does build that true? You also can't fake confidence.
No.
I remember, I'd say we talked about rejection a second ago. I was rejected by pretty much every girl that I was pursuing between the ages of 16 and I'd say 22.
Really?
Yeah. Do you know what it was? I was faking confidence. It all changed when I was actually had a sense of security in myself.
Right.
But in the period where I was like faking confidence, I was pretending I was confident. It was like they just could read past it. That's almost how I look back on the situation. So I came to learn that you can't fake confidence. You can't pretend to be it, because there's so many sort of micro expressions that end up reading more like insecurity than confidence. But what is real confidence, and how does one build it in your view?
Well, you've kind of answered your own question there in a way. So, fake confidence is like bravado, right? And you're putting on an act. And particularly women who've had to deal with this for, millennia, they can smell it, they can sense it. They don't have to, it's not in your words, it's the body language, et cetera, et cetera. Real confidence comes from actual actions, from your actual things you've accomplished, right? So, when you're 22, 21, it's hard to have that confidence, because what is it based on? Maybe it's based, maybe you're really good looking if you happen to have that good fortune and you can feel confident about that and you don't have to try so hard. All right, maybe that might work. Or maybe you're really good at sports, or maybe you're a really good dancer, or you're a really great singer, but it's based on something real. You have a skill. You have something that separates you. You have something that you can do, that you can accomplish. Because when you're 21, it's hard to have those. I look back on myself when I was that age. I had nothing. No wonder I got rejected, So it comes from what you do in life, okay? The finest sense of confidence is actually creating things and having success and meeting goals and achieving things and having a record of that, and maybe what goes with that is having some money, but it's not necessarily, because you don't have to have a lot of money, and you don't have to be good looking to seduce. That's a myth that I try to explode in The Art of Seduction. Some of the greatest seducers, male and female, were not good looking at all. It's about psychology, and it's about how you carry yourself. But the confidence comes from actually what you can do, not how you feel or what you say. Well, it is how you feel, but the feeling is based on things that you actually can do, skills that you have that separate you, that make you feel really confident, So
Body language. Yeah, I find it fascinating that, there's quotes and things that say 80% of our communication is nonverbal, et cetera, et cetera. Body language is so interesting to me because, again, I think that's one of the things that it's just impossibly hard to fake. I was reading, a couple of books on, there was a phase when I was, 20, probably just after being rejected all the time, when I was maybe 22, where I started reading books from pickup artists, and they would obsess on the topic of body language. And one of the things they'd say is, and I was explaining this to my girlfriend a couple of weeks ago, that when a man is lower confidence and when he's desperate, he does this thing called pecking in a nightclub, where he'll lean in and shout in your ear. And when he's higher confidence, he kind of leans out and he'll wait for you to lean in. Small things like that, subtleties like that intuitively we're reading and understanding and communicating and etc. But someone that doesn't have the confidence probably isn't even aware that they do. So when I reflect on my rejection phase, I think, gosh, my body language must have been exuding desperation and low status and low value, low self-esteem. What's your thoughts on body language?
Well, in my last book, Human Nature, I wrote a whole chapter on it. I quoted the figure 95%, but who knows what it really is. The thing it is that we evolved for hundreds of thousands of years before language existed, right? And our earliest ancestors depended on the group for their survival and getting along, and their powers came from observing other people and their body language. You could read it. So it's a skill that's wired into us, wired into our brains. It's a very unique skill that we humans have. It's just that you don't learn that. When you're a child, when you're 2 years old, you have it because your life depends on it. You have to see if your mother is loving you or your father is kind to you, because if not, you could be abandoned. Your life depends on it. You're great at reading that. And children are incredibly adept at picking up body language. So if someone is fake, if someone's an imposter, they hate being around children because children see through you, like radar, right? Because they're so attuned to it. You had that skill when you were very young, but you lost it because you became so oriented with words and you became so self-absorbed that you're not paying attention. But it's extremely important, right? So the whole body is involved in it. So you've got to first stop thinking about people's words so much. Because the one thing about words, unfortunately, is people can lie. They can say whatever they want. They can say, I love your screenplay. That was fantastic. You were great in that movie. I thought you were great, et cetera, et cetera. They can say anything to please, to flatter, to cajole you. But body language, man, it doesn't lie, right? So I talk in that book about the eyes and the fake smile. The fake smile is something you see every single day, but you're not paying attention. It's like, it's kind of tight, right? It's like, yeah, right? But a real smile, the whole face gets animated, and there's a little crinkly thing here as your face, as it lights up, and your eyes light up. It's hard to even put into words, but it's there. You can see it. It's real. It's not faked. Knowing the difference between a fake and a real smile is really important in seduction, in business, or whatever. To know if someone is like, yeah, I like that idea. No, they don't really. They're saying that to please you. They actually hate your idea. You master that language, you can start deciphering all this bullshit people are giving you. The face, you can disguise it a little bit. Actors know that. But you know what you can't fake? It's your voice. If you're nervous, not even the finest actors in the world can fake that. Your voice betrays so many things about you. It betrays your weakness. It betrays your lack of confidence, or it betrays the other quality, etc. right? So pay really attention to the tone of people's voices, to how fast they talk. People who talk fast are very nervous. Someone who's talks, I know I'm probably talking a little too fast here, sorry. My mind races, so I do that. Normally I don't talk so fast. But, you talk slowly, you have a certain tone, you have a certain intonation that kind of reveals confidence, okay? Body language, posture. You were talking about pecking, right? When you go and look at a meeting of people in a business meeting, you'll see all the employees kind of leaning forward, nervous, and you'll see the boss kind of leaning back, arms crossed like this, I'm the powerful one, you come to me. I'm the leader, I'm the top dog, or she, it's a woman. I don't need to be like this, I'm like this. Body language reveals a lot about leadership qualities, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. If you're at a party and you come up to someone that you're meeting for the first time and they're talking to you and you notice that their feet are angling away from you, that means that they're not really interested. They're looking for any moment to try and walk away and escape. They're not really into you. Whereas their feet are facing you, they're engaged, they want to talk to you, right? This is a whole art you can learn. You can sit there and you can read it. And I give the story in Laws of Human Nature of a man named Milton Erickson, the founder of NLP and hypnotherapy, probably one of the most brilliant psychologists who ever lived. When Milton Erickson was 19 years old or so, he had polio. He nearly died. His entire body was paralyzed. The only thing he could move, the only muscle he could move were his eyeballs. Now imagine that. He was a young man with a very active mind. He can't talk, he can't do anything. All he can do is move his eyeballs a little bit. He was so bored. Can you imagine how bored you'd be like that? You can't read, you can't do anything. People would come in to visit him. All he could do was look at them and study them. He became the greatest reader of body language ever in the history of mankind. People said he was almost had ESP. He could read everything about who they were just by looking, because he ended up recovering. He became a psychologist. Because his life depended on developing this skill, he was going to just die from sheer boredom if he didn't learn how to read body language. He mastered that language much like somebody could master French. And it's an incredibly powerful language that I can't emphasize enough.
We can go about learning the language of body language, and I'm sure that will help, but it's such a complex, there's like a thousand things with my body language at all times, like how I'm speaking, my eyeballs, where I'm looking, my posture, my arms, like am I crossing my arms, am I crossing my legs, all of these things. So the challenge of mastering all of that feels a little bit overwhelming. Am I right in assuming the easier challenge to master is in fact just like my sense of self?
Very well put.
Because,
if you feel confident, if you feel secure, if you're not all inward and insecure and worried about yourself, it will naturally radiate through your gestures. Yeah. You don't have to sit there and pay attention to your fingers, your arm, your ears, your eyes. It's just there. It's natural. So yeah, that is the solution. So the two parts of the game, it's your own body language. Be aware that people are judging you for that, right? And you can't, as you say, be monitoring everything or you'll drive yourself crazy and you'll look very weird, right? So the best solution is to feel these certain things that are going to radiate and to not give the fake smile, but when you're really happy, to just show it and show your emotion that way. And the other side, which is I think really important, is learning other people's body language, and that can come from study and is much more a logical thing than constantly thinking about everything that you do.
Your next book that I have here, Mastery. Why did you write a book called Mastery?
Well, to be honest with you, it came. The idea for it was in around the year 2010, 2009. I was getting a little worried that people who were reading my books, particularly young men, who were reading Power and Seduction, they were thinking, that's all I need in life, man. I just need to be a manipulator. I just need to play political games. That's what success is all about. And I was worried that, if you don't understand how to make something, what's going to be the future of mankind? Our bridge is just going to fall down. Our hotel's going to collapse. People don't know how to make things anymore. We don't know how to use our hands anymore, right? So being able to be good with people is extremely important as a social animal. But perhaps higher up in the hierarchy is being able to do things, to be able to have great skill and to be able to create something and know how to master a subject and to, build something that can last. That's really important. And I'm feeling like because young people, this is back in 2010, imagine now, have this idea that everything comes quick and easy because you can click, click, click and things come to you, that everything in life should be that way, that we're becoming alienated from the human brain and how the human brain operates, because the human brain requires time. If you know how the human brain operates, we have what are called neural pathways. And every time you repeat something, a neural pathway is created and strengthened and strengthened and strengthened. It's why we get addicted to things, but it's also why we develop skill. So if I'm sitting there shooting free throws day in and day out and day out, my brain is wiring it, it's learning that motor skill, that hand-mind thing, and it's getting better and better and better at it. It takes time, it takes repetition to build those pathways. And I explain in Mastery that you reach the proverbial 10,000 hours, which some people dispute nowadays. So it's just a number. It's not a fact. You've spent so long learning something that there's so many pathways. It's like this amazing inner landscape with all these connections going on in your brain. And now you can be creative. Now you can come up with things that nobody's ever thought of. You can play chess on a higher level. You can be Pele on soccer or Lionel Messi making passes that no one had ever seen before because you're not having to think, right? You don't have to think anymore. Your body just does what it wants. Imagine 20,000 hours, which is possible, just people sometimes attain in certain fields. You're almost like a genius. You're almost like superhuman, right? If you're someone who's so locked into the internet, to getting things instantly, you can't get past 100 hours, let alone 10,000. You're never going to develop skill, and you're going to find life really, really difficult for you. So I wrote the book because I was actually deeply worried that we were losing a part of how the human brain operates, something elemental part of our wisdom.
The interesting through line between that and the subject matter we've discussed in Power and Seduction is that by learning to master something, you build that sense of self-esteem and confidence that we're looking for to be good at the former topics mentioned. But on the topic of mastery, the first chapter in this book, and really the first question a lot of people ask, is this question about finding your passion. And I've always had a difficult relationship with this question because it sometimes assumes that there's one of them and that you have to go in search of it somewhere. In the first chapter of your book, you talk about discovering your life task. Why is it important? Is it the same thing? Is finding your passion and finding your life task the same thing?
No, I just recorded this yesterday on my own podcast. I went on a rant about how it's not about passion. It's not about finding your passion. I actually don't like that word passion. It kind of makes me cringe because if you think about it, passion, to succeed at anything requires time and effort and boredom and tedium. So let's just say a simple example. You're learning to play the piano. When you first sit down at the piano, you have to play these really insipid tunes. It's so boring. You have to learn, I forget what they call it, finger exercises and scales. On any instrument, you have to learn scales, etc. It's tedious, man. If you think it's got to be passion, forget it. You're never going to get far. The thrill comes after a year of playing the piano, and you get better at it, and better, and now it starts becoming fun. Then 10 years, it's more fun. Then 20 years, it's fantastic. I'm not trying to name drop here, but the other night I had dinner with Stevie Wonder. It was the most amazing thing I ever seen. He's absolute. I wish I had interviewed him for my book. Speaking of genius, and he's blind, obviously, everybody knows. But I was watching him. He performed for us. We were there with a group of friends at his recording studio. I was watching him play the piano, and he's blind, right? And he's improvising, and it's just absolutely brilliant and amazing. And as I'm seeing this, I'm thinking, I could see the thousands of hours he's been putting in, just touching these keyboards and knowing where the keys are. It was just mind blowing how amazing it was. That is the power that the human brain naturally has through hours and hours and hours of effort. That's how it works. So, he didn't get there because it was passion. He got there because he was a child prodigy. At the age of 11, he was signed to a contract with Motown Records, right? He was playing that as he was a kid, hour after hour after hour after hour. He had a love for the piano, but it wasn't like every time he sat down, it had to be passionate about it. He had the patience to put up with all of the boring stuff, okay? So you want to discover what you were meant to, what you have a connection to, what you have a love for, right? When you're a child, hopefully, or when you're 18 or 19 or 20, that's the best time to discover it, all right? You decide, and it doesn't have to be something highfalutin or worth, like intellectual. You could be great with your hands. You could be great with your body. You could be great with images and visuals. You could be great with words. You could be great in many different areas, okay? They're all equal. They're all great. You as a child are naturally, so there's a book I always recommend for people called The 5 Frames of Mind by Howard Gardner, in which he talks about the 5 forms of intelligence that humans have. Each brain by genetically is wired in one direction or the other. You want to know that, you want to feel it inside of you. It's like a feeling. It's not an intellectual thing. You feel when you're doing sports that it's good. It's a natural thing. It's what I'm meant for. When you're involved with words like I was when I was 8 years old, it felt right. It felt like a natural fit. I have to follow this path. When you're 3 or 4 years old and it's music like Stevie Wonder and you're hearing this in your head, wow, that's it for me, right? Okay? You feel it. You feel this connection. All right, now you fast forward to when you're 18 or 19 years old and you're having to make a career choice. Okay, so I call that your 20s, the most important phase of your life. That's going to make or break you in some way. If you spend your 20s trying to learn skill in something that it connects to you deeply, right? Then things are going to happen to you by the time you reach 30. You've discovered your life's task. It may not be something so specific. For me, it was writing and words, but I didn't know what to write. I tried novels, I tried journalism, I tried theater, I tried screenwriting. But it gives you a direction, and you try and you try and try, and that's what you were meant for. That's what you were destined for. You feel connected to it, you feel a love for it. And so when it comes time to do the tedious stuff, you're able to do it because in the end it'll pay rewards. You'll get better and better at it. And the connection is so deep that to not do it would be miserable. So you can't think of everything in life having to be pleasurable and having to be passionate. There's going to be boredom, there's going to be tedium. How do I deal with it? You have to feel a greater love than just mere pleasure or passion. It's got to be something so deep within you that to not do it will make you deeply unhappy. For me, not to write or be a writer, I don't think I'd be alive right now. I would have been so miserable. I would have been so alienated from who I am. So that's what will get you through. That's what a life's task is.
When you think about that, in the book you talk about the first phase, which is, your apprenticeship on your journey to mastery. When you're in that apprenticeship phase, when you're maybe early in your career, you're early on your journey to becoming the pianist, the violinist, the podcaster, the entrepreneur, whatever. What are the most important things to be selecting for as it relates to the job you take, the people you're around, that kind of thing? Like if there's a 23-year-old listening to this that is an apprentice at a floristry shop making bouquets of flower, and they're being offered 5 different jobs in the industry of floristry, which one should they be looking at if they're in the early steps of their apprenticeship?
Very easy question to answer. Thank you. You want to look for the job that offers you the most possibilities of learning. So if you're going to go to a florist shop where there's only one other person there, it's like an entrepreneur who started it, and you're going to be like their right-hand man or woman, and you're going to learn, and the pay is half of what you could get at this very fancy. You could be working at the shop at some department store where they'd pay you triple Take the job that pays 1/3, where you're going to learn the most, or you're going to learn about the business, you're going to learn from the ground up. And, there's going to be a level of excitement where, we might not survive another few months. We've got to work hard. We've got to be motivated. We're all on the same page here. A lot of people, when they're 23, they grab the job with the biggest paycheck. And that's a mistake, because if you go to like a large firm, you're kind of lost. You don't have as much responsibility. You suddenly have to deal with all the political games, the 48 laws of power. You're not paying attention. You're not developing skills as much. You don't have as much responsibility. Take the job that has 1/2 the salary, but you're responsible. You're going to be learning, and it's up to you. That's the most important thing you can do when you're at that point in your life.
You say there's 3 steps in that apprenticeship. Deep observation. Is that what you mean when you say deep observation? You mean like being able to observe the job happening, or do you mean something else?
Well, it means that. It also means, so most people, when they start a job, their first impulse is, I've got to impress people. I've got to make them like me. That's that inward direction that's so deadly in seduction and it's deadly in life. You want to be outer directed. You want to observe the codes and conventions of your field, the social codes, what's acceptable behavior, what's not acceptable behavior, the skills involved, the various heuristics, the various things that you have to learn that create skill. You want to be a sponge absorbing what's going on around you. What are the things you need to learn? What are the valuable skills? What are the things that aren't valuable? Who are the people you need to avoid? Who are the people you need to emulate? You're a laser. You're just observing everything around you and not worried about yourself. That's that's deep observation.
You talked about skill there. It's all well and good seeing skills and knowing which skills are important, but acquiring those skills is point number 2 when you're in that apprenticeship phase in life, skills acquisition. And this kind of goes to what you were saying with the working in a florist shop next to the entrepreneur. You're going to be hands-on, you're going to be doing, which is also goes to what you said earlier about parents and children, like putting them in situations where they get to do stuff.
Yeah.
A lot of jobs don't offer that. A lot of jobs don't offer the difficulty, the challenge, right? How important is that?
Well, we call it learning by doing. And you see, some things play into how the human brain operates. That's what you want. I give the image in the introduction to mastery, that pardon the alliteration here, but the brain has a grain to it. You want to work with that grain. You don't want to work against the grain because it's counterproductive. And one of the grains of the brain, is learning by doing. When, flashback 300,000 years ago, and we're sitting there, we're making tools out of bones, out of wood, etc. The way the skill was passed on to other people and didn't die with one generation was you watched this person making the tool, and then you watched them and you learned and you imitated them. Flash forward to the medieval period in Europe, where they had apprenticeship schools, 7 years, you're learning masonry, you're learning carpentry, you're learning whatever. For 7 years, you're sitting there watching somebody make things and you're doing it. That's how the brain operates. You learn by doing, not by thinking, oh, this is how things are fitted in mortar, with mortars, et cetera, et cetera. No, I'm doing it with my hands. The brain and the hand have the most connection of any part of our body because so much of our power as a species depended on our hands. We don't have much of that anymore, but learning by doing things with your hands or making things is how the brain is wired. So you want to go with that grain. So you want to do things, you want to make things, you want to be learning through action, not through just a lot of talk and,
As you might know, the show's now sponsored by Airbnb. I can't count how many times Airbnbs have saved me when I'm traveling around the world. Whether it's, recently when I went to the jungle in Bali, or whether it's when I'm staying here in the UK or going to business in America. But I can also think of so many times where I've stayed in a host's place on Airbnb, and I've been sat there wondering, could my place be an Airbnb as well? And if it could be, how much could I earn? It turns out you could be sitting on an Airbnb gold mine without even knowing about it. Maybe you have a spare room in your house that friends stay from time to time. You could Airbnb that space and make a significant amount of money instead of letting it stay empty. that in-law, that guest house, that annex where your parents sometimes stay, you could Airbnb that and make some extra income for yourself. Whether you could just use some extra money to cover some bills or for something a little bit more fun, your home might be worth a little bit more than you think. And you can find out the answer to that question by going to airbnb.co.uk/host. One of the things that you referenced at the start of this conversation, I think maybe even off camera, was in 2018 you had a stroke. And that changed your life in a very fundamental way. Can you tell me what happened and how it changed you?
Well, it was a terrifying experience. I was in a coma. I emerged from it, and suddenly, I'm somebody who's very physical. Sports was a huge part of my life. I would swim very long distances. I love mountain biking. I was doing all kinds of hiking. It was extremely important to me. Every single day I did something physical to take my mind off things. Suddenly it's taken away from me. The left side of my body is basically paralyzed. I have no control over it. To this day, I still have problems with it. Can't swim, can't mountain bike, can't hike, right? I can't take my mind, I can't think while I'm taking a hike. I can't type. For a writer, that's not much fun. I had to deal with crap that I've never had to deal with in my life. I had a pretty easy time compared to this. I had to learn new life skills when I'm already 62 years old, That isn't easy stuff. I don't want to whine or complain because people deal with worse stuff all the time. A lot of people get cancer, etc. But anybody who's had a stroke knows what I'm talking about. It's very hard because you can practice and practice and practice and practice hours and hours of therapy. I do over an hour of therapy every day, and you hardly notice any results. The frustration, it takes you 10 minutes to tie your shoes. You can't button your thing. You have to get other people to do that. It's hard to cut food. You have to be patient. You have to accept this. You have to find another way of loving your life, of accepting these things that you took for granted before. And I tell people, I look out my window now where I'm writing and I see people walking their dog, and I put myself in their shoes and I go, God, that must be so great just to walk your dog down the street. What a pleasurable thing. They don't realize it. You take it for granted now. Please don't take it for granted. Understand that the ability that you have now to run, to walk your dog, to swim, to type, it can be taken away from you. And just appreciate your life for what you have, because the things that I love were taken away from me and I wish they hadn't been. So I've had to adjust myself.
When something like that happens in life, when you are the victim of a tragedy or instance or circumstance or something that happens, there's often a degree of unfairness surrounding it. And when I read about that incident in 2018, I read that it was a bee sting that caused a clot that caused the stroke.
Yeah, I know. It's actually, I think, a wasp. But if that wasp had been like moving, the wind had been a little different and had moved this way instead of this way, I may not have had a stroke. But I can tell you this. So in May of that year, the stroke was in August. In May, I'd finished The Laws of Human Nature, which took me 5 years. And when I finished that book, I felt like I was near death. I was so exhausted. I was so drained. My wife was really worried about me because I just looked really haggard. Slowly, I kind of recovered. But then in July, I went to New York and I forgot my blood pressure medication that I take. So my blood pressure was starting to rise. And then I came back to LA and I walked in this park and the wasp stung me here. And my whole chest turned red and it was like the most unbearable feeling. So I went to the hospital. They gave me this drug called prednisone to relieve the itching. Prednisone increases your blood pressure. And so when I ended up having the stroke, the blood clot, it was right where the wasp sting was. So the neurologist said, probably all this cholesterol was released from that from that wasp sting here, and that's where the blood clot occurred, okay? But there were all these other circumstances that kind of led to it, kind of a perfect storm. And maybe if I hadn't had that wasp sting, it would have happened 4 months later under different circumstances, and I would have died. Because what happened was I was driving my car when I got my stroke. My wife was in the other seat. She saw something really strange going on my face. I didn't notice it. She forced me to pull over the side of the road. 90% of the time I'm alone. I'm swimming, I'm hiking, I'm driving. Could have happened 4 months from then. She wouldn't be there. I'd be dead right now. So I can't really think in terms of, if that wasp had been diverted. It would be a good feeling, but it's too painful for me to imagine. I like to think of, fortunately, someone was there who saved my life, because it could have very well happened 4 months from then, because my body was worn down and something much worse could have happened.
That journey you described of having to rebuild and relearn and redesign your life, we've talked about the topic of power so much in this conversation. In that moment, it sounds like your power, to some degree, had been taken from you.
You learn, like, at least for me, when I looked at people differently after my stroke. I had more empathy for them. I'm normally an empathetic person, but I was looking at people who in the pandemic who got long COVID, who were having strokes or were having terrible circumstances, or when I look at people who were disabled, because I'm essentially disabled now, I understand them. And also the other thing is, when I look at people who are really poor, who are struggling in life, they feel really dependent and helpless. I felt that physically. I don't feel that materially because I don't have that problem anymore, thank God. But I have more empathy. I understand it, not in an intellectual way, but in a visceral, physical way. That sensation of, I don't know where my food's coming from. I don't know what's going to happen the next day. I'm weak, I'm dependent, I'm helpless. It's miserable. I kind of understood that feeling now on a different level, on a level that affected me personally, and it's a lot different than having it affect you in an intellectual way.
The phases in that journey to where you are today, the first phase after the incident, you wake up, you realize that your life has changed. What's going on in your psychology? What's going on in your mind? You talked about helplessness and depression.
Well, to be honest with you, what happened to me was right afterwards, there was a level of delusion in my mind. I kept thinking, well, in 3 months, I'll be back at it. In 6 months, I'll be swimming. In a year, I'll be hiking again. I wasn't aware of how hard the process was. And then 6 months, 8 months, a year down the road, as I realized I was wrong, that's when the depression set in. That's when it really started hitting me. I thought I'd be back. Here I am 4 years on. I thought I'd be back to my life, but I'm not. So that's what was the hardest struggle, was actually a year in there and going, there's a phase where you kind of plateau, where you're not really progressing anymore. That's the worst part of it. I'm progressing now again because I have a great therapist, but I had to deal with really bad depression about a year and a half in, when it started to realize, this is my life, man. I'm going to always have this funny arm that's bowing in. I'm going to be walking like this. I never expected this in my life. So I've had to deal with that, and I've had to kind of find a way to not let it get me down, to find other pleasures and joys in life, etc., which I have.
How do you find a way to not let it get you down? I'm thinking now about people that are listening to this that might be struggling with their own subjective struggles in life. They've lost their job. They have a disability, whatever it might be. What are the successful strategies you've deployed to try and keep that peace of mind?
Well, I don't know how much of it is applicable, because I'm at a phase of life where I don't have material worries, and I could have had a kind of stroke where my physical element would have been untouched, but my brain would have been damaged, which is another part. That would have been worse, because I wouldn't have been able to write another book. And I have a very active mind. So for me, being able to write another book is my salvation. So when it's 3:00 in the afternoon, when I get down to writing, it's the happiest moment in my life. I feel at peace. I'm back to my work, and I love my work, and I love what I'm writing about. It's saved me a lot. I do meditation. I've been meditating now for about 12 years, I think, more than that. Every morning, it's a ritual. I have to meditate. If I don't, something is wrong. And I've never missed a day, I can honestly say. And it just calms me down. It just gives me a strength throughout the whole day. So I get up 7 o'clock. The sun's usually shining because it's Los Angeles. And I go, it's the morning. I'm greeting the morning. I'm greeting the sun. It's like I'm somebody 4,000 years ago in a tribe. There's the sun. It's a miracle that there's even something like that. The birds are chirping. I'm looking at the ivy. The sky is blue. I just calm myself down. Intrusive negative thoughts start popping into my mind. You didn't do this. You have a podcast today at 2 o'clock, Robert. You want to do this, that, and the other. I'd get rid of them. I go, calm down, put that away. Ground yourself in the. It's helped immeasurably. The other thing is, always keep in mind that there are people who have it worse than you. So I don't want to feel sorry I don't like the sense of feeling sorry for myself. In fact, sometimes I turn it around and I look at that person walking the dog or jogging and I go, I actually feel sorry for you because you're not aware of how precarious life is. You're not aware of how this can be taken away from you. You're not aware of how precious it is to just be alive and just to see the sky and the birds. So I feel better than you in a way. I turn it around. I don't want to feel sorry for myself. There are people who have it worse. I read in the newspaper all the time, cancer, or you're in Ukraine, or I was dealing a lot with people in Iran right now, what they're dealing with. I don't have to deal with that kind of crap, like being in Iran and dealing with that daily life. How horrifying, These are thoughts that take you out of the moment where you're feeling sorry for yourself and you're kind of grateful for certain things. So those are